Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Blanche, you represented the president in at least three criminal cases, the hush money payment case in New York, the January 6th case, and the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case. You said when you appeared last before this committee, you would consult with ethics lawyers about that apparent conflict of interest in handling any case involving the president, having been his personal counsel. Did you consult with Joseph Terrell, a senior ethics lawyer at the department?
I believe I met with Mr. Terrell, yes.
Did Mr. Terrell tell you that ethics laws and policies required that you not be involved in cases involving your prior representation of the president?
Yes.
So in those three matters, the hush money payment case, January 6th case, Mar-a-Lago case, you were to recuse yourself?
I'm recused, correct. Well, by the way, the cases are not ongoing, Senator, but to the extent there's any work around those cases, yes, I'm recused.
So you said to CPAC a couple months ago, the other things that are happening, there is not a single man or woman at the Department of Justice who had anything to do with those prosecutions, meaning the prosecution of the president. So you're saying that it's not a conflict of interest for you to be involved in the firing of prosecutors who prosecuted your client, your former client? There's no conflict there? Is that
no, there is. I wasn't involved.
So
that would be a
at
conflict.
CPAC, you're taking credit for the firing of these Department of Justice lawyers, but you're not willing to take responsibility before this committee. Is that the case?
No.
Okay.
I'm making, there's a statement I gave at CPAC.
You were bragging about this at CPAC, the firing of these prosecutors, the firing of the FBI agents, the getting rid of everyone who investigated your client. You were proud of that, speaking for the Department of Justice, but you don't think that's a conflict of interest. You moved to vacate, I don't think you're going to deny involvement in this, you moved to vacate the convictions of 12 Proud Boys and Oath Keepers, which erased their convictions, restored their gun rights. These people were convicted in the January 6th investigation, which also involved the president, who you represented. You were involved in dismissing those cases, were you not?
I'm the acting attorney general, so yes, my department moved to dismiss. I was not involved.
So you didn't recuse yourself from that matter. You were willing.
There's no reason to, from the Proud Boys matter?
Yes,
I mean,
it was.
Lawyer, you know the rules. There are rules that say when I have to be recused, and that's not one of them.
And there are rules, and when you're told to recuse yourself from investigations that you handle for the president, you're supposed to recuse yourself.
No, when I represented the president.
You have also said, you've also refused to release Volume 2 of the Special Counsel's report. That was an investigation into the Mar-a-Lago documents case. How is that not an abundant conflict of interest? Refusing to release to the public an investigative report of an investigation into your client.
I am not a judge. A federal judge.
No. The department's position under you, Mr. Blanche, was do not release the report.
So that position.
If you went into court asking them to release it, it would be released by now. So how is that not a patent conflict of interest?
What you're saying happens to not be true. I did not do that. What you're talking about happened before I became the Deputy Attorney General.
So you support the release of Volume 2?
No, I don't, but I'm recused and had nothing to do with that case. Like, you can't accuse me of violating my ethical rules and then lie about what I did.
So you had nothing to do with the decision to prohibit the release of the report? You had nothing to do with the department's position?
I wasn't in court.
No, I'm not asking whether you were in court. I'm asking you whether anyone sought your opinion or used your guidance in refusing to release Volume 2.
When
You're saying you had nothing to do with that decision?
Litigation was ongoing. I was a private citizen, still representing the President of the United States. It was before March. Since March, to the extent there's been anything in front of that judge,
Mr. Blanche,
I haven't been part of it.
I asked you in your last confirmation hearing whether you would release the report, and your answer was no. Your answer was not, I will recuse myself. Your answer was, no, I will not release the report. That was your testimony last before this committee. You subsequently were advised by ethics lawyers not to be involved in these matters, but it appears you were involved in these matters. Let me ask you about another matter.
I wasn't involved. You can't say it appears I was involved, but I said I wasn't.
Let me ask you about another one you have your name on.
The truth has to matter at some point.
Yeah, it does matter. We just don't hear much of it from you. But let me ask you about another matter you have your name on. I don't think you can deny responsibility here, and that is the IRS settlement agreement. So you put your name on this. That absolves the president of tax liabilities in the past The president was convicted in the case you represented him in of falsifying business records in part for tax purposes. Does this settlement not absolve the president of any liability for tax crimes associated with what he's already been convicted of?
That's not what he was convicted of. It not have to do with
Well,
for tax
I'm happy to
purposes.
read the statement of facts. The participants took steps that mischaracterized for tax purposes the true nature of the payments made in furtherance of the scheme. So you know,
The
Mr.
participant
Blanche,
there was not the president. It was somebody else.
Well, if the president is conspiring with others to falsify business records to help them cheat on taxes, he is also exposed to liability. You know that as well as I do.
He can't be audited for that.
And of course he can be. Of course he can be. And he can be prosecuted for it. But the agreement you signed on behalf of your former client, on behalf of your current client, in a staggering example of self-dealing prohibits that. Let me ask you this. Does this tax agreement, this addendum you signed, also hold him harmless from any audit or tax liability with respect to the billions in crypto money he made in his first year as president?
It's not forward-looking. So to the extent there are taxes filed by the president or his sons or the Trump organization after the date of that agreement, there's no protection.
Well, but before that agreement. So any taxes...
he hasn't filed taxes yet for money he made last year, right? So
yes.
No.
So if he
no protection.
If he filed tax returns this year for money he earned last year, that his sons earned as World Liberty Financial, all those people earned and defrauded taxpayers on it, he faces no liability under this agreement you signed.
There's no evidence taxpayers were defrauded, and he is
but
not
protected. There's evidence in this agreement that you've absolved him of any liability over.
No, I just said he's not absolved. So the question
So this agreement doesn't apply to a tax return filed last year or filed this year?
To tax returns filed after the date of the agreement? No,
No,
it does not
before the
apply.
agreement. A tax return filed in this calendar year before this agreement.
Before the agreement, it applies, not after.
Okay, so for a tax return filed this year for last year, for the billions he made, there's no tax liability even if he cheats on his taxes or his kids do or his business do. He is absolved of that further potential liability.
No.
Well, it's in the plain language of your agreement. Did you write this language,
You
by
have
the way?
to use the facts, though,
Did
that
you-
he hasn't
did
filed
you-
taxes yet. So when he files taxes, there's no protection based upon this agreement.
Did you write this language?
Did I type it up myself?
Did you write this language?
No.
Well, you put your name to it.
I did.
So who wrote this?
I don't know the person that actually.
One question. That is all Senator Adam Schiff needed. He did not need a document. He did not need a witness. He did not need a recording or a transcript or a forensic examiner. He needed one question, directed at the right person, in the right room, at the right moment on the committee calendar. And he had been waiting for exactly this moment since the immunity deal was announced. The question was simple. It was 9 words. And Todd Blanche, one of the most prepared defense attorneys in the country, did not have an answer for it. Let me tell you exactly what happened. The hearing had been running for an hour and 50 minutes before Schiff was recognized. The subject before the committee was the scope and application of the tax immunity provision that had been attached to the reconciliation package, the specific provision that exempted certain categories of income from federal tax liability for the current term. The provision had been drafted in language that was, by the assessment of every independent tax analyst who had reviewed it, unusually broad. Broad in ways that appeared to extend the exemption beyond the categories explicitly named in the statutory text, into categories the text did not name but also did not exclude. One of those unnamed categories was cryptocurrency income. Trump had, in the months preceding this hearing, received cryptocurrency payments in amounts that had been publicly reported but not fully disclosed. The payments had arrived through mechanisms that the existing disclosure framework had not been designed to capture. And the tax immunity provision, as written, had not explicitly addressed whether those payments fell inside or outside the exemption. That gap, between what the provision said, what it didn't say, and what had been received, is the gap that Schiff's 9 words were aimed directly at. He said, "Does the immunity provision cover the crypto?" 9 words. Directed at Blanche, who was present in his capacity as a legal representative for the administration's position on the provision's scope. 9 words that contained, underneath their simplicity, a question that every tax attorney in Washington had been privately discussing for 6 weeks and that nobody had yet asked, on the record, in a formal oversight proceeding, to someone who was obligated to answer. Blanche's first response was procedural. He said the question of the provision's application to specific income categories was a matter currently under review by Treasury and that it would be inappropriate to characterize the scope of the provision before that review was complete. Schiff said, I didn't ask about Treasury's review. I asked about the provision. It's a yes or no question. Does the language of the immunity provision, as written, cover cryptocurrency income received by the President? Blanche said the question involved complex interpretive issues that required analysis of both the statutory text and the legislative history and that he was not in a position to provide a definitive legal conclusion in this setting. Schiff said, then let me try it differently. Is there anything in the text of the provision that explicitly excludes cryptocurrency income? 4 seconds. Blanche said, Senator, the provision uses specific defined terms and the application of those terms to various income categories is. Schiff said, I asked if there is exclusionary language. Is there language in the provision that says cryptocurrency income is not covered? 3 seconds. Blanche said, the provision does not use the word cryptocurrency. Schiff said, that's not what I asked. I asked if there is language that excludes it. If the provision doesn't mention cryptocurrency at all, doesn't include it, doesn't exclude it, then I need you to tell me what legal principle determines whether income that the provision doesn't name falls inside or outside the exemption. This is the specific architecture of what Schiff had built. Because Blanche had just confirmed, on the record, that the provision contained no explicit exclusion of cryptocurrency income. And Schiff's follow-up placed that confirmation inside a legal framework that had only one honest answer. Blanche said, Senator, the general principle in statutory construction is that exemptions are construed narrowly, and that income categories not explicitly named in an exemption are generally presumed not to be covered by it. Schiff said, so cryptocurrency income is not covered. Blanche said, Senator, I'm not in a position to make that. Schiff said, you just told me the principle. Exemptions are construed narrowly. Income not explicitly named is generally presumed not covered. The provision doesn't name cryptocurrency. Are you telling me the principle doesn't apply here? 6 seconds. Blanche said, Senator, there are arguments on both sides of that interpretive question. Schiff said, there are arguments on both sides. That is your answer. There are arguments on both sides of whether the President's cryptocurrency income is covered by a tax immunity provision he signed into law. I want the record to reflect that answer. He let it sit for 4 seconds. The room was quiet. Then he said, because here is the problem with arguments on both sides. The President has already received the crypto. The immunity provision is already law. And the question of whether that provision covers that income is not academic. It is a question with a dollar amount attached to it. A large dollar amount. And the person who signed the immunity provision into law is the same person who received the income the provision may or may not cover. I want the record to reflect that too. Blanche said, Senator, the President's personal finances are subject to applicable disclosure and tax requirements. Schiff said, that's not responsive. I'm asking about a specific provision that may exempt specific income received by the specific person who enacted it. That is the question. And the answer you've given me is that there are arguments on both sides. I'll take that answer. It's in the record. He looked at his papers. Then he said, I have no further questions for this witness. He was done. He did not summarize. He did not editorialize. He placed 4 specific facts into the permanent hearing record and stopped talking. Fact 1. The provision contains no explicit exclusion of cryptocurrency income. Fact 2. The general principle of statutory construction presumes unnamed income categories are not covered by exemptions. Fact 3. There are arguments on both sides of whether that principle applies here. Fact 4. The person who signed the provision is the same person who received the income it may cover. 4 facts. In the record. Adjacent to each other. Requiring no commentary. Because when those 4 facts sit next to each other in a permanent congressional record, They do the work that Schiff's commentary would have interrupted. Leave your answer in the comments. Share this video so others understand what arguments on both sides means when it comes from the administration's own legal representative, and what four facts sitting adjacent to each other in a permanent record communicate without a single word of editorial on top of them. Subscribe because the Treasury Review Blanche cited is now a formal committee subject, and the next hearing will begin exactly where this one ended. 9 words opened it. Arguments on both sides closed it. And everything in between is in the record.